Once upon a time, in the busy streets of Benin City, there lived a woman called Helen. She was 32 years old, beautiful, calm, and respectful. Everyone in her neighborhood called her Mommy Peace, not just because she had a 7-year-old daughter named Peace, but because she always avoided trouble. Helen had been married to Richard for 8 years. They lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment near New Benin Market. Helen was a hairdresser. She owned a small salon along Oba Market Road, where she made wigs and fixed women's hair daily. She wasn't rich, but she was content. Richard worked with a logistics company in Lagos. He only came home once or twice a month. Helen didn't complain. She was a loyal wife, always sending him prayers, cooking his favorite meals when he visited, and never asking too many questions. But with all that loyalty, her heart was about to break. One Friday morning, Helen was about opening her shop when her phone rang. It was her old secondary school friend, Naomi. "Babe," Naomi shouted, "you still dey this Benin like old mama?" Helen laughed. "Now you run go Abuja now, leave me." Naomi continued, "See I dey enter Benin next week. My cousin dey do traditional marriage on Saturday. I wan carry you go. Plenty food, free food and drinks." Helen smiled. "I no even get fine clothes o. I go send you one, don't worry. You must follow me." They laughed. It sounded like a normal call, but that call would lead to something Helen could never imagine. The next week, Thursday afternoon, Naomi arrived Benin and came straight to Helen's salon. They hugged, screamed, and laughed like girls again. Naomi handed Helen a golden Ankara gown. "This na the clothes where family people go wear. I still remember your size. I know it will fit you." Helen smiled. "So I go look like bride family?" "Yes, now you go follow me enter." On Saturday, which was the wedding day, the sun was hot. Music was playing from the speakers. Helen wore the golden Ankara gown. Naomi gave her a light makeup and tied her gele well. They looked beautiful. They entered the wedding venue, a compound in Ohehe area. There were canopies, white chairs, and a big traditional wedding cake. Drummers were playing. Women were dancing. Helen looked around. She didn't know anyone, but she didn't mind. She just danced, smiled, and followed Naomi. She didn't know what was coming. The bride came out first, a beautiful, light-skinned young lady named Stephanie, probably in her early 20s. She was dressed in a red wrapper with coral beads. People clapped, they held her, they sprayed her money. Then the MC said, "Now, make we welcome the groom, the man wey love pass sugar." Everybody clapped, drums rolled. Then the groom walked out, tall, dark, wearing a white George wrapper, beads on his neck, smiling proudly. Helen turned to look, and the plate in her hand fell. She froze. Her legs became weak. Her breath stopped because the man walking out as the groom was her husband, Richard. Everything slowed down. The drums, the laughter, the music, it all became distant noise. Helen couldn't move. She just sat there, staring. Her heart pounded like a drum inside her chest. She whispered softly, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus." Naomi noticed. She turned, laughing until she saw Helen's face. "Helen, what is it?" Helen whispered, That's my husband." Naomi laughed. Stop playing." But then she looked at Helen again. Her smile vanished. "No, it can't be." Helen was already shaking. She tried to walk, but her legs failed. Naomi caught her. "Helen, breathe. Please breathe." Helen was gasping for breath. She was now sweating despite the makeup. Naomi held her hand and walked her out of the crowd. Outside the compound, Helen sat on a stone holding her chest. Tears rolled down silently. She didn't scream or shout. She just cried and whispered again and again, "Why, Richard? Why would you do this to me?" Naomi sat beside her, shaking her head. "You mean you never separated?" Helen nodded slowly. "He was just in Benin last month. We were together." Naomi covered her mouth. "My God, As Helen sat there, her mind flashed back to their wedding day. Small, simple, but full of smiles. The night she gave birth to Peace, he carried the baby and cried. The day she sent him her last 5,000 naira to survive in Lagos. The night she knelt down to pray for him. And now, this is how he paid her, by marrying someone else. Meanwhile, inside the compound, Richard danced with his new bride. People sprayed money on them. He smiled and looked proud. He didn't know Helen had seen him. He didn't know the woman he had built life with was just outside the gate, crying. Later that night, Helen sat on her bed at home, still wearing her wedding guest gown. Her daughter Peace was asleep beside her. Helen stared at the ceiling, eyes dry now. Her phone buzzed. It was Richard. He just sent a message. Sorry I couldn't call you this week. Work has been stressful. We'll try to come home next week. Hope you and Peace are okay. Helen stared at the message. Her fingers shook. And then she typed just one word, okay, and sent it. Helen walked to the mirror. She looked at herself. Her makeup was half gone. Her gele had fallen. Her eyes were red. But she looked herself in the eye and whispered, you will not die. You will not go mad. But these secrets must come out. The next morning, after the wedding, the whole world looked different to Helen. The sun was up, but it didn't feel warm. The air was fresh, but it didn't smell sweet. She was awake, but a part of her was numb. Her daughter Peace was brushing her teeth inside. Helen sat on the bed, her wrapper tied tightly, eyes swollen from crying all through the night. She stared at her phone again. The same message from Richard. Hope you and Peace are okay. A man that had just married another woman and still had the confidence to send her a text. Naomi returned to Helen's house around 8 a.m., holding hot akara and bread. She entered the room quietly. Helen didn't speak. Naomi sat on the bed, placed the food on the table, and took Helen's hand. I'm sorry, she said softly. Helen didn't answer. After a long silence, she whispered, Naomi, I slept with him just 3 weeks ago. Naomi's eyes widened. Helen continued, he told me he was working hard so we could move to a better place. He kissed me, held me, prayed with me. Then she looked up slowly. How can someone sleep beside me and still be planning another wedding? Naomi had no answer. Later that day, Helen made a decision. She bathed, dressed up in a clean gown, packed her hair and picked up her phone. Naomi followed her. Where are you going? Helen didn't stop walking. To his mother's house. At Mama Richard's house, the old woman was sitting outside peeling okra. She looked up and smiled. My daughter, what a surprise. Helen didn't smile back. Mama, did you know Richard got married yesterday? The woman's face didn't change. She placed the okra down and sighed. I was going to tell you. Helen's mouth opened. You knew. The old woman looked tired. My dear, you know men. He said you were not giving him peace. He said he needed a child-bearing woman. Helen staggered back. I have a child for him. Only one. And you've not given him another one in 7 years. His new wife's father is rich. This marriage was his chance to rise. Helen couldn't believe her ears. So he married another woman with your blessing. Yes, Mama Richard said calmly. Sometimes as a mother, you make hard choices. Helen shook her head, then said slowly, I came here today to tell you something. I'm not going to cry again. You all think you've won, but you guys have no idea what I am capable of. She turned and walked away. Around 10:45 p.m. that night, Richard returned home. Yes, after marrying another woman, he came back to Helen's house in Benin, the same house he had built with her, the same house they raised Peace in. He opened the door and walked in like nothing happened. He dropped his bag, stretched and yawned. "Ah, this Lagos road no easy oh," he muttered. Helen was sitting on the couch. He looked up and froze. "Oh, you're still awake." She didn't answer. He smiled awkwardly. "What happened? Why is your face strong?" Helen stood up slowly. She walked closer to him. She stared into his eyes, then asked quietly, "How was the wedding?" Richard froze. His smile vanished and his eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Helen didn't blink. "The wedding in Ohehe, the one you had yesterday. You wore white George. The bride wore red. I was there." Richard opened his mouth, then closed it again. He opened it again, then sat down. "Okay, let me explain." And he gave the weakest excuse ever. "I didn't plan it like that," he said. She's just a girl I've been seeing. Her parents pushed me into it. Her father gave me 5 million naira to marry her. They promised me a land document in Lagos." Helen said nothing. He continued, "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was going to tell you. I just didn't know how." Helen laughed bitterly. "You slept with me while planning your wedding. You told our daughter that you were bringing toys. You told me you loved me. I do love you." Helen raised her hand. "Stop." And then whispered, "You are a demon in human skin." Richard stood up. "Don't talk to me like that." Helen didn't back down. "Or what? Will you beat me? Or will you run to your new wife?" Richard grabbed her arm. Naomi, who was hiding in the kitchen, rushed out and shouted, "Leave her alone." Richard let go. He picked up his bag. "I don't need this mess. I just came to rest. I'm going back to Lagos." Helen looked him in the eye. "Make sure you never come back." The next morning, Naomi was still at Helen's house when Peace brought a parcel from the gate. "Mommy, a man gave me this." Helen opened it. Inside was a small envelope and a brown file. She opened the file. It was a court paper. It read, "Petition for divorce filed by Mr. Richard Emmanuel against Mrs. Helen Emmanuel." Helen's hand shook. Inside the envelope was a note in Richard's handwriting. "I'll take full custody of Peace. She deserves a better life." Helen fell to the ground. "No, no, no." Naomi grabbed her. "Mommy, what is it?" Peace asked. Helen held her daughter tightly and cried loudly, "He wants to take you away from me." 3 days later, Helen sat in the office of Barrister Angela, a female lawyer known for fighting women's rights. Angela read through the file slowly, then looked at Helen. "You're going to fight this." Helen looked up. "How?" Angela smiled. "We'll show the court that he's a liar, a cheater, and a man with no honor. And when we are done, you won't just keep your child. You'll get everything he thought you were too soft to claim." On the day of the court hearing, the courtroom was half filled. On the left sat Richard, dressed in a clean black suit, beside his lawyer, Barrister Mmadu, an older man with a cold face. On the right, Helen sat quietly beside Barrister Angela, the strong female lawyer who had promised to fight for her. Behind Helen sat her friend Naomi and 2 other women from her salon. But the person sitting closest to Helen was her daughter Peace, just 7 years old, dressed in her neat yellow and brown school uniform, her small hands holding her mother's palm tightly. The judge entered. A woman in her 50s walked in and sat down. "Court in session." The bailiff called the case. Richard Emmanuel versus Helen Emmanuel. Petition for divorce and full custody of the child, Peace Emmanuel. His lawyer, Barrister Mmadu, stood up confidently. "My lord, my client is a responsible man. He has cared for his wife and child for years, but due to the wife's bad behavior, including disrespect, laziness, and failure to produce more children, he has chosen to end the marriage." The judge looked up. "Mr. Emmanuel, what is your main reason for requesting full custody of your daughter?" Richard stood up. My lord, the mother is not capable of raising the child well. She lives in a one-room apartment and runs a small salon that can barely feed them. I want to give Peace a better life. Helen's fingers clenched, but she said nothing. Barrister Angela stood up. My lord, we asked the court to hear Helen's side. This is not just about who earns more money. It's about the truth. The judge nodded. Mrs. Helen, please come forward. Helen stood up slowly. She walked to the witness box. She looked at the judge, then at Richard, then at the quiet crowd, and for the first time, she spoke her truth. My lord, I was married to Richard for 8 years. I gave him a daughter, my prayers, my money, and my strength. I slept beside him while he was planning another woman's wedding, and I found out the truth not from his mouth, but by attending that wedding myself, wearing the bride's family clothes. The courtroom gasped. The judge looked shocked. Even Richard's lawyer looked confused. Helen continued. He lied to me, slept with me, collected money from me, and now he wants to take the only thing I have left, my child. She turned to the judge. If that is justice, then let the world hear I fought with my voice. The judge raised a hand. Mr. Richard, is it true you married another woman while still legally married to Helen? Richard hesitated. His lawyer whispered, Deny it, deny it. But Richard looked up and said softly, Yes, there were more gaps. The judge leaned back in her seat. So, you are a bigamist. Barrister Angela smiled slightly. The judge continued, This court does not reward dishonesty. We will now hear the child's preference. It is unusual, but the judge asked to speak with Peace privately. In a small room beside the courtroom, the judge sat across the little girl. My dear, she said kindly, who do you want to live with? Peace looked down, then looked up. I want to live with my mommy. She bathes me every day, sings for me at night, and she gives me food even when she has not eaten. Dad only comes when he likes, and now he has another woman. The judge smiled gently. Thank you, Peace. In court, the judge gave her ruling. This court finds the petitioner guilty of dishonesty and deception. The marriage is hereby dissolved. Full custody of the child, Peace Emmanuel, is granted to her mother, Helen Emmanuel. Mr. Richard is ordered to pay monthly child support. Helen broke down into quiet tears after hearing the judge's verdict. Naomi hugged her. Richard sat with his face buried in his hands. 1 month later, one quiet evening, Naomi rushed into Helen's salon with her phone in hand. Have you seen the blog? Helen looked up. What blog? Naomi showed her. Man who married 2 wives caught in fake land deal. Allegations of fraud and family betrayal. The article included a picture of Richard in handcuffs. Helen dropped the comb in her hand. What happened? Naomi smiled. His new in-laws found out that he faked the documents he promised them. They reported him. Now EFCC is involved. Helen looked away slowly, then whispered, What you build with lies always crashes with truth. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at Helen's shop. It was from Richard. She opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note. Helen, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I hurt you deeply. I let pride and greed lead me. Now I sit in a prison cell and I finally see clearly. Please tell Peace I love her. If God gives me a second chance, I will not waste it. Richard. Helen read it, folded it and placed it in her drawer. She didn't cry. She just said softly, This chapter is over. A year later, the sky was soft and blue. Children were walking home from school. Buses honked at the moved tree ring road. Inside a new small salon in Ubo, Helen stood at the doorway smiling. Her salon had a new name now, Peace and Grace Beauty Place. It was bigger than the old one, brighter and better. She had 2 workers now, Customers were increasing, and slowly, life became calm again. Peace was now 8 years old and in primary 4. She had grown taller and smarter. She still asked questions, but not the kind that broke Helen's heart anymore. That dark season of her life, she had survived it. It was a Sunday when the second letter came. Same handwriting, same sender. Richard Emmanuel, inmate number 4002, Ikoyi prison. Helen opened it slowly. Dear Helen, this place is cold, but it has helped me find myself. I don't deserve your kindness, but I want to say thank you for taking care of Peace. If I ever come out, I will not disturb your life. I only hope one day Peace can write back. Tell her I love her. Richard. Helen folded the letter and placed it beside the first one in her drawer. She hadn't replied either. She had nothing left to say. One Saturday afternoon, Helen was plaiting a woman's hair when someone walked into the salon. It was Naomi. She came in holding a black envelope. Helen, you have to see this. Helen wiped her hands and took the envelope. Inside was a court release paper. Richard had been granted early release for good behavior and health reasons. She froze. He's coming out? Naomi nodded. Maybe this week. Helen said nothing, then quietly replied, it doesn't change anything. 3 days later, Peace called out to Helen while they were doing homework one night. Mommy, will I ever see Daddy again? Helen turned to her slowly. Why do you ask? Peace shrugged. Some girls in school say their daddy picks them from school. Mine never has. Helen knelt beside her. Do you miss him? Peace nodded. I don't remember his face clearly, but I remember when he bought me blue sandals. He smiled that day. Helen felt something shift in her chest. She took a deep breath. I won't stop you if you want to see him, but you must always ask questions and always protect your heart. Peace nodded. Naomi arranged a meeting. It was quiet, no noise and no pressure. When Peace entered the restaurant with Helen, Richard was already seated at a corner. He looked thinner, older, but more peaceful. When he saw them, he stood up slowly. Helen remained behind, but Peace walked forward. She stopped in front of him. Are you my daddy? Richard knelt down. Yes, I am. She stared at him for a moment, then slowly reached out and hugged him. Richard began to cry. I'm sorry. Helen turned her face away, but tears still rolled down. On the ride home after the visit, Peace asked, Can I see him again? Helen smiled faintly. Maybe once in a while. Will he come home? Helen shook her head. No. Some things, once broken, cannot be fixed, but you will always be free to know him. Peace nodded, staring out the window, then whispered softly, I'm glad you're my mommy. Helen smiled, and for the first time in a long while, it really reached her eyes. A small church program was happening near their street. Helen was invited to speak as a guest, a woman who rose again. She stood on the stage, the microphone in her hand. Peace sat in the front row and Naomi beside her. Helen looked at the small crowd and began. I used to think the worst thing that could happen to a woman was to be cheated on, but I learned something deeper, that the worst thing is trying to lose yourself to hold someone who was never holding you. I gave love, I gave loyalty, and I was repaid with shame. But I didn't break. I stayed standing for my daughter, for myself. I want every woman listening to me today to remember this. When someone forgets your value, don't forget it with them. Choose yourself and don't be ashamed to start again. The church clapped. Peace clapped too, the loudest. And Naomi whispered, You're stronger than you know. The moral lesson of this story reminds us that loyalty is not weakness, but don't lose yourself proving it. When betrayal comes, rise. Don't sit in the dust of someone's lies. You can forgive and still never return to pain. Your child watches your strength. Your healing becomes their protection. Sometimes, you don't win back what you lost. You win back who you are.